Too much of me, but we have to
Hi. Good afternoon, Beavercreek Rotary. Glad to see y'all here today. Seems like it's been a long time since we've been together. But, hey, would you like to give me a treat? Well, good afternoon. Join me in prayer. Oh, Holy Creator, let me awake and see the beauty that surrounds me all day. Let me hear the singing of the birds that make their wonderful song. Let me thank God for all my health that has been good to me so far. Let my dreams come true when wishing upon a star. Let me be thankful for friendship that was lovingly given me. Let me never forget the caring that was made for me to see. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Good catch. Thank you. Come back.
Hey, Josh, where's the attendance update, sir?
We're at just under 65 minutes. I can't wait. What did he do? Yeah, our guest today is so streaming.
Sergeant Arnold, she ready?
You got me.
Topic you need to be out there. All right.
It's always one.
I'm ready to be out there in service and training someone.
Not yet. All right. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, and our incredible speaker who will be up here shortly. And welcome again to the Rotary Club of Beavercreek, and happy National Walk Safely to School Day, which I think most of us skipped out on that back in the day, since we all walked 5 miles up a hill blindfolded in a blizzard with a heavy backpack on as well.
Oh my God.
Moving on to some birthdays coming up. We only got two, coincidentally both on May 22nd. Barbara DeMari and Andrew Hunt will be celebrating their birthday. Some awesome things that have happened today in history. Going back to 1846, the Associated Press organized in New York City as a nonprofit news cooperative to reduce the cost of covering the events of the Mexican-American War. And since then, they have collected a total of 59 Pulitzer Prizes. 1906, the brothers Wilbur and Orville Wright were granted U.S. Patent 8293 for their, quote, new useful improvement in flying machines. 1967, we have Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which is the longest running U.S. children's television series, aired its first episode. And then in 1980, the groundbreaking video game Pac-Man was first introduced into an arcade in Tokyo. Does anyone know what it was first called before it got the name Pac-Man? Pac-Man. And follow-up question, Josh. Do you know where the inspiration came from for the character Pac-Man? So the guy that created Pac-Man took a slice of pizza out of a pizza box and thus became Pac-Man. And then fast forwarding to 2003, Swedish professional golfer Annika Sorenstam became the first woman to play on the PGA Tour in over 58 years. Moving on to some things to celebrate, starting tomorrow, it is National Lucky Penny Day, if you can actually find any of those anymore. It's also, if Joe was here, he would definitely be sending everyone an invite to this big day, National Drinking with Chickens Day, which I wouldn't be surprised if they have wine and kegs inside their chicken coop right now. Sunday, we got the Indianapolis 500, but not to be outdone by National Wyoming Day.
You're on your way, Doc.
Monday, we got Memorial Day and National Wine Day. Tuesday, we got World Redhead Day, along with National Paper Airplane Day. Wednesday, we got Nothing to Fear Day and National Flip Flop Day, which I saw Shannon celebrating early. Thursday, if you don't know what to eat for dinner, you got National Brisket Day and National Hamburger Day to choose from. And if you're looking for some fun things to do next week, Monday, the city of Beavercreek will be having their annual Memorial Day ceremony at Veterans Memorial Park starting at 2 p.m. Tuesday, our friends at the Chamber will have their monthly Zoom Business Boost, how to deploy AI to save 10 hours per week and increase profit margins by 10%. That sounds like a 10 out of 10 to me. That'll be from 9:30 to 10:30. I got some Beavercreek awesomeness, our school awesomeness to pass along. A lot of sports are wrapping up with school being over. Women's varsity softball, they ended their season 16-12 and were the district runner-ups. The men's varsity baseball beat Ryle High School at Great American Ballpark, and Easton Grimm was awarded the PNC MVP award. Women's track and field at the GWALK Championship, Faith Brown took first in the 100 meter, the 100 meter hurdles, and the 300 meter hurdles. Lamaya Domingo took first at shot put, and Anais Early took first in long jump. The men's team, Jackson Davis took first in the mile and the 2 mile. Aiden Hildebrand took first in the 400. Aiden Allen took first in the 800. And then the guys relays team took first in both the 4x200 and the 4x800. And then the middle school track and field teams, we had Callie Richards, Sophia Richards, Ella Groen, and Ellie Allen take third place in their individual meets. Then we also had the boys take seventh in the 4x800 at the OHSAA state meet. Men's varsity volleyball finished the season 17-9 and are the GWALK champs. Women's lacrosse, we had Aaliyah Williams scoring her 200th goal and Brianna Mosby breaking the school record by scoring her 209th goal. We also had Andrew LeBlanc on the men's lacrosse team break the school record, scoring his 234th yards. Now everyone's favorite part, today's fines. If you're not wearing your badge, that'll be $1. If you were late, that'll be $1. If you ever found what you thought was a lucky penny on the ground, well, that's going to be a lucky day for our Rotary Club because that's $1. And then, sorry, Josh, but if you ever play Pac-Man, that's $1.
I'll catch a beer by you. Just allow us to put $1. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody have any happy bucks?
I have 5 happy bucks for everybody that helped install the flags, and especially Shannon, who drilled 50 holes in the rain over 3 hours.
I am very happy. My youngest son, who tested my patience for the last 13 years, is graduating high school.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Still engaged. I have a couple of happy bucks. Last Saturday, while our fellow Rotarians were drilling holes in the ground outside of the Beavercreek Church, the library hosted an event called Throwing Up Green, which was a graduation of kids who graduated from the Dolly Park Imagination Library, and then also an early literacy event. We had close to 600 people in. Wow. And then my other happy buck is that tomorrow morning, Stephen Brown and I will be on an early morning flight down to Honduras with Dr. Starr. So for the feasibility study for our international project.
What's your safe trip? Definitely. Any other happy bucks? Okay. Chris, you ready for the 55th? All right. Who's all ready? That's it. License free number 177. There you go. I agree with Jim too. Thank all the people that came out to help. It went pretty quick. putting their flags up. I don't think we was there an hour with it. For 5 minutes, because once they get all the holes dug and all the flag strips are just popped them in, they take long. I just forgot my work. There's, it's the diamond. Some yeah. Can you love your boots? What, which way is it? Yeah, you also have nothing, it's not a process, no more. Make it done. I'll get you done. I don't, you. That's, you had a, conflict of schedule
Yes, my daughter's birthday.
for the, Rotary dinner.
Yeah.
I got everybody that was on the board, the back. And on the back of it, the 250th anniversary of our country.
Very nice, thank you.
Very nice, you're welcome.
Exactly.
Well, that's demand for help, for participation and joining in and keeping me on time. Dennis Stewart. Yes, sir, you. You're now in trouble. If you come up with a second. Sure. It's not on the board, but probably should be.
I agree.
Ever since I've been coming. Denny has been doing our invocation. Doing the invocation every week. And I just wanted to thank him for his help. There's a steel straw in there to go with it. But he's been doing it for years, and it probably should be a board position, I guess. Or spiritual leaders. That's right. Jim Rudd. But you can't guess what I'm talking about. Jim, you've been the director of the flags for heroes for ever since I can remember. And that's another position probably ought to be on the board, but I got you one of these mugs too. To thanking you for all you've done this past few years. And I want to get that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Don's not here. He's always got a lot to do. You already got the 55th in the winter, all that good stuff? Okay. Good check. Want to remind you, we removed the flags at Be Hope Church on the 27th. I think next Tuesday.
That's right.
Wednesday. 27th. About 4 o'clock, we take them all down. And it'll go down probably just about as quick as it went up in that particular case. Oh, and we're not having a meeting on July 3rd because of the 4th of July holiday. I'll mind everybody that. I'm sure you're wondering, it's 162 days to Halloween. I know you're wondering. Thanks for everybody that wore their Hawaiian shirts. Hey, everybody. Mike was supposed to.
He's right here, honey, he's right here.
Oh, I didn't see you come in. I'm sorry about that. I'm here. I was talking. I actually couldn't see you. That's funny. Sorry, Mike. Oh, no problem. You don't see you. So when I sign up, I do one thing. This is true. Thank you, David. Oh, thank you. I have the honors of introducing my friend, Glenn Dewar. Glenn was born in UK. He is a Beavercreek resident. His wife, Rebecca, and his 3 lovely children, Declan, Harper, and Camille, live right here. Glenn has been on city council in Beavercreek, Ohio, since 2020. Glenn is also, in his part-time job, is the chair of the Department of History and Government at Cedarville University since 2023. He is also a professor of international studies, which he's going to tell us more about. And come on, Glenn. Let's do it. And so, 44 minutes. Very welcome. So, those of you that know me, I have a mix of professor, and every now and then at church they let me preach, and so I can talk for a long time if needed. So, but we'll get into this. My talk today is entitled "Prink, BRICS Plus, and the War with Iran," and there's a lot to all of that. But first, I want to start by saying thank you for having me again. Thank you for the invitation. Thoroughly enjoy it every time, and just grateful to be in a room with so many friends. So thank you so much. And so
I'm going backwards. So I'm just gonna sit up here and we'll do it.
that's okay. All right. Well, to get going, we have a couple of acronyms that may be new. BRIC and BRICS Plus. And maybe you're wondering, well, what do they have to do with the war with Iran? And I'm here today to argue that they have a lot to do with Iran. It's very significant, and I'm trying to peek beyond the headlines. There's more that's happening here in particular. So CRINC is an acronym that has become increasingly popular, as you can see on the board. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And more they work as an axis to undercut the Western-led world order by the United States. We tend to think of democratic countries that enjoy the free market. And the CRIP countries are working typically in tandem. Not necessarily overtly, but as I'll reveal and get into more detail, I think there's something to be said there. Not to the point where it must initiate some form of conflict, but it's also to say there are some things happening behind the scenes. I also want to talk about BRICS Plus. The acronym BRIC goes back to 2001. It was designed by Jim O'Neill, an economist with Goldman Sachs, to look at ways to invest in the world in the 21st century, emerging markets. The foreign ministers met for the first time in 2006, and it became an actual organization. And the S and the plus have grown with it over time as well. So as you can see, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa joined in 2010 formally. There are 6 others now in the BRICS plus another 10 associate members. And so these are acronyms that we'll work with as we move forward. So next slide, please. So if we look at the map of the Middle East, we have Iran, major country, wedged between Iraq and Afghanistan, not far from Israel. And certainly there's much that could be said far beyond 44 minutes in terms of a history of Iraq. We can go back pretty easily to the Medo-Persian Empire, for example, that dislodged the Babylonians in the Old Testament. Go that far back. But certainly as a modern country, the 1979 Islamic Revolution had displaced the Shah, and it's been a brutal, what's called 12-ish theocracy, and really been an enemy of the United States and many of our allies for a long time. But we should disentangle the government from the people, because the people in Iran have very, very bravely protested on numerous occasions, whether the 2009 Green Revolution or in 2022 following the killing of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman that wearing her head covering properly. She was assaulted and then killed by the morality police in Iran, and it sparked a very significant protest in that country. But what we've seen since December of 2025 is much more significant. People en masse coming onto the streets
And arguably now upwards of 50,000 have been killed. So think about that in terms of a number. In the United States, we have protests under the First Amendment. When one person dies, it's a big deal, and rightly so. 50,000. And this is at the hands of a very terrible government located in Tehran, the capital. Iran is far more complex than we see. And it is worth noting that the war with Iran that's been ongoing for several months now started out of the protests. But also noteworthy in this is that Iran, for the first time, directly attacked Israel in April of 2024, then again later in August, and then in May of 2025. Previously, they've been in conflict through proxies. So there's a much greater concentration between the two. Next slide, please. And in particular, with the conflict with Iran, we have the Strait of Hormuz, a very, very significant choke point of global oil. Some 20% of all the world's oil passes through this area. And Iran has made it very difficult. One of the reasons why gas prices have gone up so significantly, even though we in the United States are very insulated, we now produce most of our oil. It's from the from Canada or Mexico, a handful of others as well. But typically, we're unaffected by this. But there are 4 global baskets that have a knock-on impact for price. And so that's one of the reasons why we're seeing price increase as well as the regular transition from winter to summer blast. And so the Strait of Hormuz, you can see, passes through this very narrow gap. Kuwaiti and oil passes through here, in particular, the UAE as well. But Iran right now is making it very difficult for any oil to pass through, and they're negotiating with Oman, that has this exclave out here as well, to create a permanent toll system of any oil that comes through. So that could be increasingly problematic as we move forward. This is one of the major dangers of the way that it's set up right now. And on my final slide, I'll look through just different options that we have. Next slide, please. So in terms of background, Persia as the initial country, I talked a little bit about Japan in 1979, highly, highly authoritarian. Of the 92 million people, though, it is a very, very complex country, far more than we see or hear about in the media. So one example is that some 55 to 67% of people in Iran are ethnically or linguistically Persian or a derivative of Persian. That's a pretty wide gap. I'll get to that in more detail in just a bit, but it also says at least 1 in every 3 Iranians is of an ethnic and linguistic minority that doesn't typically like being ruled by the Persians. And we're also seeing some major changes, like evangelical Christianity has become very, very popular. Some arguably 3 million Iranians are now evangelical. It's arguably a place in the world where Christianity is growing the most. And it's a surprise, and it's something that's happening. Iran has also had a long-standing nuclear weapons program developed through a number of decades. If we go back to 2016, we have the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or what's known as the Iran deal. President Trump decertified that in 2017 and then withdrew in 2018. President Biden never rejoined that, although the deal was upheld for a time by the other members of the P5+1. The P5 are the permanent members of the UN Security Council, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China, plus the one is Germany. And so even when the United States withdrew, the P4+1 still largely worked with this. The deal put in place uranium enrichment at 3.5%. You need to get to 90% to have a working nuclear weapon. The problem is that the Iranians frequently did not allow the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, to go in to verify what was happening. And with frequency, it was suggested that Iran was going well beyond the 3.5%. It's one of the reasons for the initiation of conflict and one of the reasons why it's such a volatile and dangerous area. And so that is background as we continue to move forward. Next slide, please. So in Iran, this is a country that's broken down into 31 different provinces. The vast majority of people in this central area are ethnically and linguistically Persian or speak Farsi. And around the periphery, a lot of different ethnic and linguistic minorities. To go back to Iran's nuclear program, if we compare it to other cases like Iraq or Libya or Syria, what's different about Iran is that they have really decentralized a lot of the program. In Iraq, when the Osirak reactor in 1981, it effectively ended the nuclear program. We didn't know it at the time, and it was used as rationale for the 2003 Iraq war. And again, Saddam Hussein, like Iran, had often violated or not dealt with the IAEA in a way that most people would consider respectful and transparent. But that one strike in Iraq ended a lot of their program. Similarly, in Syria in 2007, Israel struck the southeastern region of Des Azur and largely ended their program. And Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, one of the few things that he did right in his long career as authoritarian leader is that he gave up his nuclear weapons program in 2004. Iran has some 130 different sites. So unlike these other cases where there's a singular one that you can take out, even though there was a very significant bombing campaign by the Trump administration and it significantly set it back, as well as their missile and rocket depots, it is a difficult intelligence issue to know how many of those 130 sites are still operational and at what point can they still break out to a nuclear weapon. That is one of the most pressing concerns. Next slide, please. So let's get into some greater detail about the heterogeneity of Iran. So you can see on this map, as I've indicated, a lot of ethnic and linguistic minorities. The biggest of which is the Azeri population in the very northwest. It's some 16% of the population. And you may have seen in the headlines that Azerbaijan and neighboring Armenia go to war with one another with some frequency, and they have even in the 2020s. When I raise this in class, I say, who does Iran side with? Do they side with Shia Muslim Azerbaijan, or do they side with largely Christian Armenia? And you would think, logically, that Iran and Azerbaijan would be close. The answer is actually Iran sides with majority Christian Armenia. One of the reasons is the Iranian government has long been fearful of the power of this minority and actively works against it for fear that they will try to create a greater Azerbaijan, that they will try and extend the borders down or have something wider in that way. So Iran has a lot of complexities in that regard. You can also see a major Kurdish population along the very, very west. The Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the world without a country or without a state. That's a big deal because it often leads to ethnic cleansing or genocide. Saddam Hussein in the 1980s as just one example, and that doesn't get into Turkey or Syria, other places where there are very, very significant Kurdish minorities. And it is worth noting that in the Iraq War, the Kurds in the very north of Iraq were a very, very good ally generally to the United States. You can see a range of others, whether Arabs or below, or Turkmen up here. I'll go back to a point I made earlier, 55 to 67% of Iranians being ethnically or linguistically Persian and Farsi speaking. The exceptions to that are the Luri population here that is close in proximity to Farsi, as well as the Mazandaran population up here. So sometimes they are lumped in with the Persians, which creates the 67 number. When you take them out, that's where you end up with the 55% number. Note as well that there's significant religious diversity within the country. The fully marked in presence in green are Shia, those that are not are Sunni. And I go back to there are a lot of minorities, and that Christianity is growing very, very quickly as well. Iran is also very young. That is, they had their baby boom in the 1990s. We had ours in the 1940s and 1950s. GIs, like my paternal grandfather coming back from World War II. My dad is the oldest of 6 children, for example. In Iran, they had theirs in the 1990s, meaning the median age is about 35, 32, somewhere in there. So it's a very young population. And bear in mind, the revolution was in 1979. So there are a lot of Iranians that don't remember it, are younger, they're digital natives, and they live on social media, particularly Instagram and Telegram, a Russian social media source. So they are well aware of the world outside of Iran. They also want a normal country, because this is a country that has long underperformed economically. In the backdrop to the conflict, the currency was almost worthless to exchange on the international market, and unemployment is hugely very, very high. And so you think about that, coupled with the fact that Iran is a very, very well-educated society. A lot of people have studied, they've worked to gain different credentials, and then there's no job. Yeah, so you think of the anger, it's one of the reasons why so many were willing to go into the streets, and over 50,000 dead when put down very, very brutally by the government. And bear in mind, the government holds all of the guns and the weaponry in the society. Next slide, please. So to get into some more detail about BRICS, I gave you the backdrop from Jim O'Neill in 2001, but it formally was created as an entity in 2009 as BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. South Africa was added in 2010. It is worth noting that Brazil is frequently an ally of the United States. It sometimes depends who's in power. And India has generally been a very good ally of the United States, but it is worth noting in the wider world that countries sometimes play off the big powers against one another. We saw that a lot in the Cold War, countries playing off the United States and the Soviet Union. They're doing that again now with the United States and China. If we were to get mad at India about this, India turns around and says, well, why do you not pick a side between us and Pakistan? And so that's the Indian case, and I don't necessarily blame them on it, but it's also to say that when you're democratic and largely free market based, probably should have a closer proximity to the United States, but I do get their wider point. We've also seen a very concerted effort to add different countries. You can see Egypt and Ethiopia, Iran and the UAE in 2024, Indonesia in 2025, and Saudi Arabia is considered a member at the forthcoming 2026 BRICS summit hosted by India later this year. I have a question mark in place because this is something that hasn't been announced. If you go to Wikipedia or another source, Saudi Arabia will not be listed as a member of BRICS. But if you go to the BRICS website, they are listed as a member. Now, they applied in 2022. They were going to join in 2024 with these others. They opted to punt on it. And even as late as May of 2025, they were still punting, and yet they are considered now a member fully. There are also 10 other punts. Now, to break down this grouping a bit more, the president of Egypt and the crown prince of Saudi Arabia are pretty good allies of President Trump. Ethiopia as well, under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, has also had some proximity with the United States, and the UAE has been a very good ally of the United States. So some of these countries are playing both sides, but it is worth noting that China is looking at this as a mechanism to become far more powerful through trade and soft power in world affairs. Next slide, please. So you can see this is from the 2023 summit. This is when there were 5 formal members. There now are 11 plus 10 others. And they generally have a major international summit where they get together to talk about issues from the developing world's perspective. And increasingly, it has become an anti-Western or anti-G7 forum to some degree. So in this picture, you can see President Lula da Silva. He's up for re-election this year. If you recognize the name, he was president of Brazil from 2002 to 2010. And legally, under their constitution, you can serve 2 terms, take a term off, and then come back. So it is legal, but it will be very, very closely contested. And Brazilian political divisions. Xi Jinping is the leader of China. He's been in place since 2012. This is President Cyril Ramaphosa Modi of India, who's been in since 2014. He's currently serving his 3rd term. This is legal under the parliamentary system, and both Brazil and India are democratic countries. On the end here is an interesting one because you have the function Sergei Lavrov. Note that Vladimir Putin is not here. There's a warrant out for his arrest by the International Criminal Court because of charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his invasion of Ukraine. But increasingly, Putin is attending some of these summits, albeit when he has to take a stranger flight plan around countries that would send him to the International Criminal Court in The Hague in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. And so if we're looking at the broader picture globally, you can see if we go back 35 years to 1990, that the G7 countries, the 2 North Americans, that is Canada and the United States, 4 Europeans, France, Germany, the UK, and Italy, and in Japan, that have often met since, they've met annually since 1973 to try and coordinate again terms of trade in the world. You can see a reduction overall in the percentage of nominal gross domestic product, but still a plurality within the world. But notice the rise of BRICS, and you can see since 1990, roughly 10%, now roughly 30% as of last year. And so this is becoming a more significant issue globally, one to watch at least. And again, within the BRICS, Brazil and India are decent allies, but are aligned in BRICS. Next slide, please. So let's move to the CRINC issue, because when we think about what I laid out with the war with Iran, I noted Israeli and American strikes, and I talked about the backdrop of Iran attacking Israel for the first time. And typically, the way that Israel had dealt with Iran's nuclear program previously was that it often sent Mossad agents or Sayeret Matkal, the special ops, into Iran to neutralize scientists, to basically try and push back the program by getting at the scientists. directly responsible. But something changed, whether it was Netanyahu's ambitions or it was genuine intelligence to say that Israel is genuinely fearful of Iran getting a nuclear weapon and detonating it on Israel. After all, the former Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, about 20 years ago, talked about wiping Israel off the map. And it's a threat that Israelis have taken very, very seriously ever since. And so when we're looking at the media narrative, we see Israel and the United States, we see Iran. We sometimes hear of allies in Europe. Are they going to allow usage of a base or airspace or not? That has also been in the discussion. But I want to open the door a little bit to talk about the crink links. President Trump recently, a couple of weeks ago, met with Xi Jinping, the leader of China. It was overall a genuinely good meeting, seemingly by the big two powers in world affairs. Xi, though, didn't say an awful lot about what China wants, other than it wants an end to the conflict, because it does indeed get pretty significant supplies of Iran's oil. And unlike the United States, which produces a lot of its oil, China does not. And China's economy, like any other growing economy, needs energy. But it still manages to obtain a lot of Iran's oil at a significant discount, and there are ways to get it out of country where China's economy has managed to move forward. But on the world stage, China doesn't say a lot, but behind the scenes, they provide a lot of support for other countries, whether drones or other materials for Russia's war against Ukraine, or seemingly a lot of tacit support for Iran behind the scenes. And I'll get into some of the ways that they do that in just a little bit. Russia has used Iranian drones, particularly the Shahed drones, Shahed missiles, in the war with Ukraine. North Korea sent troops to Ukraine to fight for Russia. And we should also note that crink countries get around Western sanctions by going through third-party countries, whether neighbors or some of the BRICS plus countries that I mentioned as well. It's one of the reasons why I have both in there. Next slide, please. So how does Iran get around sanctions, at least sometimes? Well, they do it through a range of different means, whether shadow fleet oil tankers, that is, mechanisms to change the flag of a tanker, or to have ships meet in open waters to exchange that way. There are also a range of different shell companies, shell banking that takes place, various different discounts that are offered in particular to China that keeps a number of countries afloat, notably Russia and Iran. Various smuggling of different parts through a range of different countries. If we were to go back to the map, I could show you some of the major routes. And Iran also uses a range of regional trade mechanisms as well. So all that's to say is we're in a war with Iran. Their economy is hurting. Unemployment is high. Their currency is nearly worthless on the world stage. The people are protesting. Why, logically, isn't the country just collapsing? Or the government collapsing? This is why it's not collapsing. There are a lot of different ways around it, and it is receiving a lot of support from the BRICS plus and the crink countries. Next slide, please. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that Iran has a surprising ability to muddle through. We can think of Venezuela in very similar terms under Nicolas Maduro. For the last quarter century, under Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, the country just continued to decline. Some 8 million people have fled Venezuela. The economy has continued to sputter, and until Maduro was arrested, it was muddling through as well. Despite all of those difficult conditions, Iran has that same ability to muddle through. And that's one of the dangers for American policymakers, because on paper, it looks like Iran is very, very weak and vulnerable to collapse at any minute. It can probably go on for years. That's the danger. The Strait of Hormuz is now a major global issue, and if it's not solved, there could be others. There are other countries in the world. Indonesia is looking at the Strait of Malacca and thinking, a lot of global trade comes through here. If we just throw a fit on the world stage, maybe we can collect tolls, or maybe we can impose issues on the world, and there are a range of others like that as well. It's very unlikely that global oil prices will decrease until there's a solution. And we also have to wake up to know that there's a broad network, whether it's all of the BRICS plus countries or just some of them, as well as the CRIC countries that are actively opposing a Western-led world order. This world order, if it changes, would no longer be democratic, and it would no longer be free market based, even though China's rise has largely been along the lines of state-led capitalism. So it would still be somewhat market based, but there would be heavy, heavy government influence and subsidies, which could be very, very detrimental to American companies. Think of automobiles, for example. Both the United States and Canada have a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs or electric vehicles. Imagine if something like that is lifted. China's EVs are heavily, heavily subsidized by the government, meaning how does GM or Ford or Stellantis, what used to be Chrysler, keep up with that? I mean, it would knock out Detroit. It would have a knock-on impact in Toledo and Akron and Fort Wayne and other parts that are very still, Chicago, still very, very strongly connected to the auto industry. So it's one to watch. Next slide, please. So what are the options? This is difficult, and it's one of the reasons why foreign policy is so challenging, because decisions have to be made based on some history, but knowing that there's just a set of very, very difficult options. And so I'll work through the options and I'll try to point to what's probably most likely and what could work, but there are pros and cons with each. The first one is to simply withdraw now to end the conflict and just to go home. That would be quick and clean in a way. But the con is it would allow Iran to then just control the Strait of Hormuz, and I don't know that oil prices would change. Plus, it would then allow Iran to develop continually its nuclear program. A second option is to keep the status quo, to be technically at a state of conflict, but to try and cajole Iran to open up the Strait of Hormuz, but also to find new suppliers. The United Arab Emirates, for example, a couple of weeks ago left OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's a cartel, typically around a dozen countries, and they control supply. And it's one of the reasons why prices rise and fall. For those of you that remember the oil shocks of 1973 and to a lesser extent of 1979, OPEC is a big reason. And so this is possible. The United States could really try and ramp up its supply. Venezuela's supply is coming back online after years of mismanagement by the Venezuelan government. The UAE, with a pipeline that goes around the Strait of Hormuz, could certainly be an asset here. Canada, with higher prices, could get out a greater supply from its tar sands in Alberta, for example. But none of this is going to happen overnight, meaning that oil prices are going to maintain a significant level unless there's a deal. And again, if it's the status quo, Iran continues to develop a nuclear weapon, a brutal regime is still in place. Third option is a deal could be made with Iran, but Iran is very, very reluctant to say, I'm giving up my nuclear program because, well, they're looking at Ukraine. Ukraine, by the way, used to have the third largest, highest number of nuclear weapons in the world. When the Soviet Union dissolved in December of 1991, a significant number of those nuclear weapons were in Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. Ukraine had the third largest number of nuclear weapons. They gave it up in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. But Iran is looking at this and saying, well, we're not going to give up our nuclear weapons. And so a deal could be made. Maybe there'd be some form of moratorium on nuclear weapons progress. Maybe there'd be greater transparency in the IAEA. But Iran's already had that opportunity and squandered it. So it's unlikely to end the nuclear program, but a deal would open the Strait of Hormuz. It certainly would allow oil to flow better. There'd be a decrease in prices. And from the perspective of the Trump presidency, there are midterm elections coming. And there is a political side of it. If the energy prices are high and there's a knock-on impact with inflation and then unemployment, it could be very, very difficult for Republicans in November, potentially. And so a deal is one that may come. Finally, outright regime change. Now, this comes with significant complications, and it would probably be very costly in terms of money and in terms of blood. In terms of ground invasion, my sense is that would be highly unlikely. Again, 92 million people. And a way of thinking about Iran is Iraq and Afghanistan together. Think about doing all of that collectively. It'd be a very, very an extraordinarily difficult task, one that's highly unlikely. Other options include, next slide, please. Maybe the United States would fund the Kurds, again, a reliable ally. Maybe there's something that could be done, some kind of march on Tehran. The United States could also fund Azerbaijan. US foreign policy, though, is littered with issues of funding a foreign country who then turn around and use the weapons against us. Afghanistan has one. But it is a mechanism. The downside to this, again, is that these could be used against us. But for those of you that remember the 1990s well, because of the ethnic and linguistic complexity, if war breaks out, it could be Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia's population was below 20 million. This is 92. So that is one of the very, very scary prospects of a wider regime change, because in recent years, previous slide, please. I'll mix that up. The former president of Iran died in a helicopter crash up in the very northwest. It was blamed on the United States. The reality is they were using helicopters from the 1970s that they've never updated, and trying to fly them in mountainous and cloudy conditions. Not the best of recipes. But the new president that was elected in 2025 has not been the reformer that some would have thought. Trump's strikes and Israeli strikes on Iran led to the death of the previous Ayatollah, Khamenei. His son, Moshtaba Khamenei, is now in place. And so despite the fact that the regime has been heavily weakened, a number of the upper levels have been neutralized, that regime still continues. That regime still seems to muddle through, and they've found people to select. And so which is the best of the four? I'll leave that to you, but clearly there are no easy options. Maybe something in here that keeps open this, or a deal that then, maybe there are further strikes, especially if Iran's nuclear development becomes more significant. But as you can see, there are very, very few and good options in all of this. So I'll conclude here, and I'll open the floor to Q&A. Sir, please.
Of the options, if you consider Israel is closer to the fire, which option do you think they would prefer, or will they choose after we pick an option or do nothing.
Yeah, it's a very important point that you're bringing up, because we could do any of these four, and Israel just decide we're going to do our own thing, and they probably will. They've never hesitated to work to uphold their own sovereignty. I think that they want this ultimately, but if there is a Iranian Yugoslavia, it's not good for the region. They've already seen that in Syria. Certainly, maybe from an Israeli perspective, the Syrian civil was useful in the sense that it took the Syrian government wasn't aiming at Israel the whole time. But in terms of a humanitarian issue, this is just people dying in large numbers. And then we've all seen just the brutality of ISIS that popped up in the middle of it. So ultimately, Israel's going to want some form of change. If this option is to be made, they would want very, very significant guarantees. But my sense is that they would still act unilaterally if they sense and through their intelligence that Iran's nuclear program is growing. And I would argue that Israel has very, very close intelligence on this. It's very, very deeply impacted. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't you say that Iran under the Shah wasn't a very nice place either?
No. Yeah, there are debate points because under the Shah that existed from 1953 to 1979, Iran looked different. Under the previous Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, the country was flirting with communism. It had nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the AIOC, and in our media and sometimes in social media, it's depicted that Iran was this wonderful place in the 1960s and 1970s, and maybe it could return to that. It wasn't. It was still very authoritarian, but it was much freer than it has been since 1979. So while I would agree with you in that it wasn't a great place, I would say it was still better than it has been since 1979. The key is what Iran emerges if there is regime change, because it could still be fairly draconian if there is an authoritarian leader. In the United States, our hunch is, could it be a Jeffersonian democracy and a close ally of the United States? I would love it, but it's unlikely. Please, sir.
Do you think as we're moving forward, there's a trend for a lot of these ideologies to be kind of more homogenized and more unity, or do you see more division, separation?
Yeah, I see more division. Next slide, please. Because especially when you see around the periphery, large Arab populations, Balochi, Iran and Pakistan have actually fired into the respective territories, given some of the more radical groups that conduct attacks cross-border. Plus, there's very significant internal change. Again, the young people, a lot of people turning to Christianity or to secularism. And so there are a lot of people turning against the government. Could they then unite against that government? That's possible. But there would have to be a unified leader. So to go back to the Shah, the son of the Shah is theoretically a leader that could take over, but he just hasn't been in Iran since the 1970s. There is another candidate. His name is Mir Hussein Mousavi. He ran for the presidency in 2009 and was actually allowed to continue by the Expediency Council. So there's a heavy vetting system in Iranian politics. They do hold elections, and every now and then there are surprises in those elections. So it's more open than we tend to think. But you can only run if you're a 12 Shia Muslim for the presidency if you're a man, and then also if you hold to the very hardline Islamist ideology as well, and typically come through one of the major universities as well. Mir Hussein Mousavi is someone that came through, who was very much a reformer, and in 2009, the election was stolen from him by Mahmoud Ahmadinejad when he was, quote unquote, re-elected in 2009. And so Mousavi is the one guy in the country that has experience running government functions, is known, and could be a unifier. And so that's the one guy I see where that could happen. Please.
So what do you make of kind of like this anti-Zionist rhetoric that Israel controls the United States and dragged us into this war, and we have no reason to be there?
The backdrop is the argument is that Netanyahu's been trying to do this for 30 years. And he was prime minister in 1996, 30 years ago. That was during his first term. He was ousted in 1999, spent a decade in the wilderness, came back in 2009, and has been in as prime minister almost the entire time, with the slight exception, a little over a year in 2021, 2022, when a coalition defeated him in an election. And that's a good point. There is a forthcoming election coming in Israel this year. That's one to watch. And like Brazil and the United States, their politics is very, very deeply divided. So the line of argumentation is that Netanyahu's wanted to do this for 30 years. I would argue against that because, again, there's a long history of him using special ops or military strikes or Sayeret Matkal to infiltrate Iran. And when you look at 92 million people against little Israel, the logic doesn't quite fit to me. But at the same time, I mean, President Trump has been talking about Karg Island since 1988 as a major central hub of Iranian energy. But it doesn't strike me as a conspiracy. I think what it tells me is that Iran is much more likely to directly attack Israel. Again, it did for the first time in April of 2024. And Israeli intelligence saw something different. Now, I have seen no evidence of that. And so if I was a policymaker in the US government, I would need evidence of that before engaging in it. But to some extent, we have to assume that there's something. To what degree is it verified or not is a different question. Please, sir.
We have heard through various sources that blockading of the straits has cut off Iran's capability of selling oil, and that would damage their oil wells. What is the probability that we're doing permanent damage to the oil business in Iran?
It's a great question. Can you go up one or two slides, please? One more. Yeah. I think it's probably very significant, and that Iranian missiles and weapons caches and military bases have been hit hard, as well as the 130 nuclear sites. But we don't have intelligence on the ground to say to what extent. There's some evidence that Iran is building back faster than we imagine. And these are mechanisms to get around Iran's lack of oil supply. And to go back to the CRINC countries, China is still functioning in a way that we might not expect, meaning that they're getting energy. And it's probably Iranian energy through third-party countries. So it's somewhat of a stranglehold, but Iran has figured out ways around it as well. And that's why I think they can still muddle through, unfortunately.
Make any comments?
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. A lot of good information. It's, I don't know if everybody else thinks the same way.
It's wonderful.
We're thinking this is American Iran. It's not all these other entities. Not me. Glenn, hold this thing back up. Okay. We've got a book here for you.
Well, we're gonna donate to the library. In your honor.
Well, I've done this a few times, so that's okay.
I just gotta have you sign in here. Get anywhere in there. Great. Oh, this is great. Speaking of America.
Oh, very good.
Like I say, there's a lot of good information here today. Chris will get his prep section. But
Well, that's it's toys.
where you want, Chris?
Right there is good.
Right there?
Right, right, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, appreciate it. But if we are having a board meeting after this meeting, with the old board and the new board coming in. We might do something else. Oh, don't take all the tablecloths off today. Steve asked us to just leave them on there today. They got enough golf outing that's gonna be wrapping up as soon as we get out of here. All right, everybody like the,
Go ahead, I have an announcement. I should.
oh, okay, everybody like the Pledge of Allegiance, video from 2 weeks ago? I like that. I thought that was pretty neat, the Red Scout defining all that stuff in there. I might have seen it well. But
Oh, in this week's email, there was a survey asking about what you think about how our Rotary Club is doing and lots of things. So please, please, please fill out. We've only had 5 people fill it out. So I'd love if everybody would give their feedback so we can make sure that we are following the will of the people. As we're looking into the next year of Rotary. I do have some paper ones in the back if you would rather do that.
I just want to talk with these.
With paper?
Yes. You all right with the pledge, please? Well, sit. I pledge allegiance to the flag. States of America. It's super love. And everything coming down in the other place. It's but you'll get good meetings and items. Basically, yeah,
Next.
Anyway. They haven't, she's living. But in turn.